Hi, my love. Welcome to the Gemma Hanley podcast. My name is Gemma. I'm your host. This is the space where I have honest conversations about overcoming anxiety and overwhelm so that you can calm your nervous system and feel really confident and happy and calm from within yourself. Along the way, I share my own stories of holistically healing 23 years of anxiety and depression myself. And so, if you're a woman seeking answers to perfectionism, people pleasing, burnout, resistance, you may love, you're in the right place. Let's do it. Let's begin. And before we begin, I want to pay my respects and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land upon which I am recording from, which is the Gubbi Gubbi tribe. And I want to extend that acknowledgement to their elders, past, present, and emerging, as well as anybody of Indigenous or Torres Strait Islander heritage watching this replay. Hi.
Hello.
Hi, beauty, and welcome to the very first episode of the Gemma Hanley podcast. And the reason you are hearing two voices here is because I've asked one of my besties and soul sisters to join me and actually interview me so that you can get to know me a little bit more deeply than what the short form of social media allows for. And hopefully, this is going to help you to discover why you might bother listening to these episodes. And of course, it's just a little bit more fun with the two of us here rather than me doing this solo. So before I jump in and introduce today's gorgeous guest host, I want to share with you that this podcast has been such a long time coming. I remember at least 2 years back sitting on the deck of a beach box in Brighton, in Melbourne, Brighton Beach, where I used to sit and nature soak and have all the creative downloads drop in, knowing that this would come to life. And I was scribbling on a piece of paper that I had in my pocket because often I would not take my phone or any screens. These podcasts, as far as I'm aware, have nothing to do with that piece of paper. I have no idea where it ended up. But that's where the life and the concept and the ideas began. And so for this to be another platform for me to be able to self-express and tell my story and share my coaching philosophy with you for free is just really magic and special and something I am super excited about. So let's dive in. You may have guessed that the incredible woman here with me is my beautiful girlfriend, Adriana. I still don't know how to pronounce her surname, and I don't even have it in front of me, so I'm not even going to try.
No one knows. Perfect.
Loves, that's your surname. But she's a phenomenal coach herself, and you can check her out on Instagram. Her handle is Adriana Loves. She's a business and mindset coach, and she has had a huge impact on the strategy behind my own business. She is one of my greatest supporters in my personal life in the somewhat short time, but not really short time that we've known each other. It's been a ride. We've had some wild, large experiences in those 12 months. Welcome to the podcast, Adriana.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here and get to ask you all the juicy things.
So good to have you here, girl.
I thought I would actually, it was funny because you were describing me and I was like, oh, I would describe Gemma. And I feel like this really cool thing being on the other side of this when usually, I'm on your side of this and having things reflected back to you. So, people listening can get to know you more. And I think someone who knows you so well and so personally in our, day-to-day kind of lives, it's the way I would really reflect back to what I think you're doing in the world and for people is wisdom, like such deep, profound wisdom for people to be able to tap into. And I know that's been a huge part of me getting to know you, that it's been such a beautiful thing that I've learned from you, just so much little bits and pieces, but also bringing it all forward in this like playful, fun, and easy to like consume and understand kind of way. And I love that about you. And it's always a laugh, but it's always so full of so much knowledge. And I just think that is an incredible place to be.
Thank you. That's so beautiful. Humor is definitely very, very important to me. And it's funny, I was reflecting actually with a client who's been with me for quite some time. Earlier this week, we we're having a conversation about the changes she's seen in herself, and humor was one of them. So this work can be very serious and very deep. And that is something that I just love to see women and my clients go on the journey of finding the humor and fun and playfulness in it as well, because it's not sustainable if we stay oh so serious all the time.
Yes, and I think you do that very, very well.
Thank you.
Um, a cool place I feel like to start would be like, I know it sounds so big and broad, but is your journey getting here? Like, what does that look like and sound like?
Yeah. And it is a big and broad journey. And one of the ways I guess I could sum that up, I was speaking to someone yesterday and they were asking me a similar question. And I said to them, you know what? It probably wasn't until maybe 4 years ago, for the first time in my life, that I felt truly holistically healthy, well, and happy. So I feel like that is one way to answer that question in a really quick answer. But if I was to trace back to where I really feel like the inner work and self-connection and self-expression and emotional intelligence really sparked and activated for me, like that first little piece, I can remember sitting in the lounge room of my home, like living on campus. So it was a big on campus home. I think there was maybe 22 properties in the same area. Kind of like, this sounds really trashy. So it's not exactly like this. Kind of like a caravan park vibe is like what you could imagine. Like, what are they called on caravan parks? Not the
I have no
tents.
idea.
What can you hire? I'm trying to think. The word is not with me, but not obviously not tents, but cabins is the word that I'm after. Way more luxe than cabins, but that sort of communal vibe. Yeah. And so there were 8 of us that would live in each one of these houses. And it was what they called O Week. So I'm assuming, and I think that stands for Orientation Week. So lots of partying, lots of connecting, but then also the more formal parts of that, of like sitting down in the lounge room and having people speak to you about what it's like integrating into uni, and, you know, what's expected and what might be helpful and things to consider. And I remember sitting there on a beanbag in that lounge room in this conversation thinking, oh my gosh, do I even want to be here? And probably, you know, the later years of high school for me were the first where I really consciously was experiencing stress and emotions as well. I wouldn't have known it at the time, but anxiety and depression for sure. And so it wasn't really, I wasn't, the skills of connecting inwards, um, exploring and feeling and understanding emotions, checking for sensations in my body, connecting to myself for what felt true or felt right, were not skills I learned growing up. And so to end up in that situation at uni where I wasn't sure if it was actually where I wanted to be, it was because I was running this pattern or this formula of, okay, what does the external world tell me or show me that I need to be and that I need to do to be happy and successful? And so for me, it was like I worked my ass off in year 12. Like I would be at school and then I would go to the library after school and study. And, you know, during exams, my walls were just like covered with visual prompts and notes. And so I got into the course that I was, you know, to my highest awareness at that point in time was like my dream course. So a double degree in law and business. And I chose that purely because they were the subjects that I seemed to be good at school. So like a very intellectual, logic based, rational choice and decision. And so it was that moment at uni in O Week sitting there where, and I don't know that I was super aware of what that was in that moment, but I can remember it and I can reflect back to it of, oh, I don't know if this is for me. I don't know if this is true. for me and if this lights me up inside. And so it won't surprise you that I then tell you that, you know, from that point on, anxiety and depression just seemed to build for me. There was so much discomfort and uncertainty in who I was and just how to feel happy in day-to-day life. And so I ended up finishing my business degree, transferred all the units from my law degree into my business and finished with that. And then I went on and I got my agent's rep license and I sold residential property for a few years. And again, there was just always this sense or this feeling for me of like a missing piece or like not belonging or not feeling like I could completely land and just be myself. I just always felt like I was on guard. Yeah. And very unsettled. And so as much as I loved selling property and real estate, that was really no different, that experience for me throughout that time. And again, I was really good at it. I won lots of different awards. And, you know, my peers would reflect back to me my accomplishments and what I was great at. But internally, again, it didn't resonate and I didn't feel it. And so whilst I was working in real estate and selling, anxiety and depression was still building and growing. And that began to then translate into more physical conditions where I was having issues with my heart. I was having hormonal issues. I was having issues with my gut. You know, I was starting to black out from panic attacks, really, really painful periods and issues, you know, just in all different areas and spaces of my health, allergies, skin allergies. And so from there, it got to the point where I really, like, I couldn't function at that level anymore. So I was working huge hours, 6 days a week, you know, 60, 70-hour weeks, going out and partying on the weekend to release and have a good time. And that was really one of the places where I did feel like I was just free. Yeah. And so, yeah, it got to the point where my body just literally would not support that lifestyle anymore. Moved into doing EA work for CEOs, running their businesses. So executive assistant work. And that was helpful because it took me to a Monday to Friday and more sort of set hours, but so much responsibility and huge workload still. And that was sort of when I started getting more curious. And I'd seen up to 18 different practitioners and different doctors and specialists, and nobody could give me a definitive answer about what was going on. My bloods were coming back fine. I wouldn't respond to treatment. And it was almost as if that would like be perplexing, but also frustrating, and not perplexing enough for the doctor or the practitioner to want to explore it any further. It was like, sorry, can't help you. And at that point in time, I was still very much looking for like every quick fix, every magic pill. Like, how do we just get this health issue out of my way so I can keep being successful? And like a lot of my measures back then were material items or societal standards of, you know, uni, job, promotion, partner, house, you know, new car, family, all of these things, right? Which I've come to learn are so insignificant to me when I connect to myself and what my measures of success and happiness are. But absolutely, I was definitely not in my power and not taking responsibility for what my health was asking from me at that point in time. I was seeing it as in the way rather than the way. And so, of course, it was just getting louder and more chaotic and more problematic and more painful. And there was so much suffering. And it got to the point where, you know, I started exploring nutrition, and I was going to the markets every weekend and cooking food from scratch and really enjoying those sorts of things. But it was still the minority of how I was living my life. And I was probably at this point in time, like at least 2 years deep in therapy, and things just weren't shifting. I was gaining a really great understanding of, you know, what my problems were, why they were there, not really feeling empowered or clear on how I could actually shift those or change those. I was on medication for anxiety throughout that time as well. And it got to the point where I had my therapist, psychologist, was incredible. And, she reflected back to me, there's more going on here. There's something else going on here. You're doing the work. And so I actually did a 2-week inpatient hospital stay in a mental health clinic to come off medication, because for me, it just felt like it was suppressing everything even more. And I was ready to feel, and I was ready to, I was at that point where it's like, whatever this is going to ask of me, let's just do this work. And yeah, things still, progressed even further with my health in terms of a decline. And it got to the point where I couldn't work at all. And I ended up living overseas with my dad so that he could support me and help care for me. At the hardest points, I was in a wheelchair if I was able to leave the house for 6 months. And then it was, a build out of there of like wildly radical responsibility, and just like, I cannot emphasize enough, self-honesty, like being so real and honest and raw with the reality of what was, regardless of, what that might mean. First and foremost was just like, let's just be real about what the situation is, who I feel I am, what I feel I need, what's important to me. And, what needs to be from that will figure itself out. And so when I moved into the EA roles and I was, going to the markets and getting interested in nutrition, I actually thought that I would end up studying nutrition. But I was getting curious then around functional medicine, holistic health. Yeah. And so things really just rolled on from there. As part of my own recovery, I had my own coaches. So I moved away from the therapy model and into more of the coaching model, and just was blown away by how rapid the results could be, providing, I was willing to be honest with myself and what was going on. And yeah, once I learned that, there was really nothing that sat above mindset for me in terms of growth, evolution, getting more of what I wanted in my life, right? It doesn't really matter how good the strategy is that you have, how amazing the expert is that you're working with. You're with yourself 24/7, and how we are perceiving things, the stories we're telling about things, the beliefs that we have about things, the subconscious programming around what it is we're trying to achieve. If that's not being addressed, or if we're not coming to the party feeling on board with that strategy, and by the way, I'm not saying that's something that's just like a switch that you flick, but if that is not in tune and if that is not humming along, it is really, really challenging for anything else to be going well. And so, yeah, I knew very early on, when I was starting to tap into mindset and emotional intelligence, and understanding my experiences of anxiety, there was just no way I wanted other women to struggle in the same way that I had for as long as I had. And with freedom being such a high value of mine, right? Whether that's freedom in terms of health, but like lifestyle choices, time freedom, location freedom, creative freedom, financial freedom, to self-express, to be who you are, to create the life that you want. All of those things intertwined is definitely a huge part of how I find myself where I am now. Yeah.
Yeah. And is that why you would say, I guess, that this work is so important to you? Or why is this work so important to you?
Yeah. The beginning was definitely my firsthand experience with the excruciating pain of emotions and not knowing what to do with that, not feeling like I could escape that, feeling like, in the earlier days when I had far lower self-awareness and wasn't taking responsibility, it felt like I just had to wait until I would wake up and have a better day. Yeah, it didn't feel like there were things that I could do myself. And so first of all would be my firsthand experience of that pain, and then just my connection to humanity and really just like wanting to offer an opportunity for women to not sit in that anymore.
Mm.
And I guess second to that, or linked into that, is I'm just like such an advocate for us to have these resources within ourselves, the intrinsic skills to be able to move and shift and adapt and get curious and be proactive and understand what we need, so that we don't actually need other people outside of ourselves. Like, one of the things that I say to clients is like, my goal is for you to not need to speak to me anymore, right? You might want to, because, once you reach this point where you're feeling amazing, the next evolution is, oh my gosh, I want to start this business, or I want to call in this relationship. And then that's the next level of growth for you. But this foundational work of knowing who you are, feeling happy, feeling confident, feeling free, feeling calm within yourself as your normal state that you can return to. And of course, life happens. In no way, shape, or form am I going to sit here and say, I always, always, always feel happy and confident and free and amazing. I definitely don't. But what I do know is I always have the skills and the understanding to come back into those states. Yeah. And to not do that from a place of like band-aiding or pasting things over the top, through true self-understanding and self-compassion. So yes, that's another big piece of it. Is I'm a huge advocate for, I work with women, but every individual having these skills within themselves to know how to regulate and to get more of what they want in life and to feel happier. And then I also think, when I look out into the world, I feel like so many of us have forgotten that we literally get to choose what life we live, what life we want to live. Yeah. We've either fallen asleep to that fact, or gone too far down, the false narrative of, it's too hard for me, it's not possible for me, there's something wrong with me, I must be broken, I'm not good enough to have that. Yeah. Or maybe we've just forgotten. Yeah. And I get it. It's hard when we're facing into pain, and to be honest about what it is we desire instead and have that feel so far away. That is fucking hard. Yeah, it's really hard. The women I work with, they've come to accept that every single day is a build in one direction or another. Yeah. So the things that you want and the life that you want to activate, will you have it tomorrow? Will you have it next week? Will you have it next month? Like, probably not. But the difference is, you can be on your way to that, or you can be staying stuck. You can be staying stagnant. Yeah. Or you can even be creating even more situations and scenarios that will then require you to unravel from, to heal from, to feel the pain around. And so that is a choice that we have every single day, each and every one of us. And that choice of moving in the direction and building in the direction of the life that we truly desire and want and will thrive in, let me just say, some of those days moving in the direction of that will not feel joyful, will not feel happy. Yeah. And I know that you get this. Like, we talk about this all the time, and it's our life. We live it. We're both very growth oriented and very much value that. And so, it's not unusual for us to be sitting in days like that.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I guess for me, and this is why I love what I do, I just don't know what else there is to life, right? If we're not, and I sent you a voice message. I can't even remember the context of what we're talking about, but earlier in the week, I think we were actually probably talking about our own growth that we're both moving through at the moment. And I just said to you, I don't think there is any other topic or thing in the world that intrigues me more than human psychology and our subconscious, and what how that plays out in the reality that we're experiencing, but also when we're willing to get curious and have that self-honesty, how huge and how quickly things can shift and change.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh, I'm like vigorously nodding. I could not relate more. You can't see me. That is what I'm doing. Um, it's so amazing. Every time I hear your journey and your story, I'm just like in love with it and all its parts, its ups, its downs. And I know that this journey so well of the road forward too.
Mm.
What would you say, something you said earlier, actually, quite a bit ago, in the part where it was the hardest, or quote unquote, your health was the worst, and the fatigue and all of those. Can you paint a picture? Like, I always find it interesting when you talk about when you lived at your dad's, what that was actually like in that time, because I always found that really useful to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't even know if you've heard this part before. You can tell me. But the thing that pops up first for me was like, yes, the anxiety and the panic attacks and the blacking out and just like such high levels of uncertainty of, what my life was, what was happening in my life, what the future was going to look like. A huge piece of working through that for me was my ability to learn how to receive. Yeah, to not be that fiercely independent woman anymore that had to do everything herself. And it's not only about not doing everything yourself, it's also being able to surrender into believing you're worthy and knowing you're worthy of receiving help and pleasure and support and ease. But depression was very alive for me then too. And I remember one week in particular where it was like the absolute toughest for me throughout that entire period of being unwell and not knowing how long it was going to take, what it was going to look like. Beneath the surface, I always knew there was more to life. Like there had to be more to life. It didn't feel believable to me that I or anyone would be put on this earth to experience that pain and that would be it. But this particular week, that would have been the hardest. And I would have questioned that the most. And I just knew that, like, if I walked out onto the balcony, that I just felt like I would just jump off the side. Like life felt so hopeless. It felt so hard. And I just felt like I was in a hole so deep that I didn't know how I was going to get out of there. And what I did know is that if I stayed away from that area, I would figure it out and that things would be fine. And I looked, that was actually probably one of the most productive ways that I have looked outside of myself as to what was important to me at that point in time. But super challenging, like the noise that is going on in your head and the self-talk can be so consuming. Yeah, and I think one of the best strategies that I had for that and that I still speak into to this day is switching up our environments, switching up what's happening around us, whether that's the people or the places, giving yourself the opportunity to be stimulated by different things, to hear different things. Being really mindful about what content we're consuming. Yeah. Like, I don't think it's come up in this conversation, but, often I'll refer to a quote that I heard or a teaching that I read or a TED talk that I listened to. And those moments have completely shifted and transformed the trajectory of my life or the pace at which I've healed or understood something or grown. And those moments have only happened because I went looking for them or I was open to them. Yeah. Rather than purely sitting in the pain and indulging in the pain and being a victim to the pain.
Indulging in the pain, I can absolutely relate. And I feel like one of my final things, like really that I think is really useful, and obviously I've heard you talk about this too, is what do you feel like the things that helped the most for you were, both from like a physical, like, actual 3D perspective and an inner perspective?
Good question. I'm going to start with the physical because that pops into my mind first. So from the physical, it was definitely, And I don't see the emotional and the physical as separate. So the emotional work right up there at the top in terms of how well and how strong I began to be able to feel in my physical body, like without a doubt. And to this day, you know, if there is a sign or something that my subconscious or my intuition is wanting me to see, like some of those I'll have, and I haven't seen it yet, or I haven't heard it yet, or maybe I am ignoring it. I'm not listening to it quick enough. I will have, you know, eczema show up on my skin, or I will have bloating, or I will be feeling really tired and lethargic. Yeah. And when I go inwards and ask those questions and connect with myself and hear the answers and honor them, that self-honesty piece again, the physical shifts. So definitely the emotional work. And when I did my training, that was a huge part of that. How do I want to explain this next piece? Like holistic lifestyle, of which nutrition played an enormous piece. But also just reducing my exposure to toxins, like anything, you know, like chemical products, whether that's like face, you know, face care, or like skincare is what I'm trying to say. Face care, skincare, you know, what I'm washing my clothes and my bedding in, the quality of water I'm drinking, whether the food that I'm eating has been sprayed with chemicals or whether it's organic. Um, Definitely nothing like perfumes or anything like that. Yeah. Being really conscious of blue light and, you know, just what now is like common sense lifestyle choices for me, but like that holistic approach to life. And then the other one that I feel fits in here for me that was quite big was chiropractic care as well. Did you ask for 3 of each, or did I just make that up in my
No,
head?
but I love this. I'm loving 3 of each.
So funny. I feel like now I've done myself in to come up with 3 really good things on the mindset side.
Everyone listening is going to be like, yes, there's 3.
Maybe you said a few and I was like, right, 3 physical, 3 emotional.
Oh.
So they were the 3 physical. I don't know if you're going to get 3 emotional. I'm just going to like jam and see what comes up. But here's the biggest thing and the biggest starting point for me around mindset and emotional. There's 2. The first was, and I like to categorize it into like a false narrative. So getting so clean and honest and clear. Where am I just living out of a complete bullshit story? Right. And some of that's going to be obvious. And if you are stuck and you feel like you've done the audit of the false narrative and you're still stuck, there's going to be like subtle threads still happening in there and things that your ego just does not want you to see. Right. It wants to keep you safe and protected, doesn't want you to grow, doesn't want you to change, doesn't want you to take risks. And so if we're not playing in the false narrative, then we're looking at the facts of reality, right? And that can feel like words that come up, that can feel harsh, it can feel brutal, it can feel confronting, it can feel offensive. And that is where the fucking power is. And that is where the magic happens from. And this is the difference between clients that I see that get results and that stay where they are. Oopsie. Stay where they are, or they get the sugar highs, right? Where they're like, they feel like they're moving forwards and they do for a bit, but then it feels like they crash, or like they start questioning themselves, or it feels like the old patterns are popping up again. So that was just like, and to this day, like everything I teach, I am still living. Yeah. So that deciphering between, okay, which parts of this are a false narrative, and society has done such a great freaking job at having us very easily buy into these false narratives, right? And so when you look outwards, that's often not going to be a great measure for whether or not you're operating in a false narrative. And then, yeah, the other side is getting really honest about the facts. And then the second thing I want to speak to is just like emotional expression, movement of the body, intuitive movement, conversations with my subconscious, with intuition, with universe, God, source, spirit, whatever it is, life, that we resonate with. And actually allowing emotions to be present, welcoming them in, allowing them to play their role, treating them with the respect, because they are there on our team. Yeah, they are devoted to us reaching our full potential, and they're there for a reason. And when we connect inwards and hear and feel and see and release and honor that reason, there is actually no purpose for those emotions to maintain. And so they don't, right? And one of the things that I say over and over and over again is that the pain is in the resistance. The actual real pain is in all of the fighting and like the kicking and screaming we do to actually surrendering, to feel, loosening the grip, surrendering and feeling the emotions. When we go there, the pain already has started to subside and to shift and move. So yeah, there we go.
Yeah, wow. So many pieces in there. Like wrote notes. I was like, yes. So powerful. And the pain is absolutely in the resistance. I've definitely found that a lot in my long journey too. I just love hearing all of it. And I think you just have so much beautifulness to share with the world. And especially that piece on, for me, I feel like that real piece on hearing you talk about your emotional processing and how that was, and the bullshit story is, I feel like that's one of the most powerful things I learned from you. And I feel like that now I play out really well, and all the women in your world do, I'm sure. Is there anything you feel like that's, you know, you would feel true to you to kind of share to close this all out in this beautiful combo?
I don't think so. I feel like you have done a marvelous job, my love. I feel like a lot of it's been spoken into, and there's just so much more to come as well. It's been a really good introduction to, I think, who I am and what my vibe is and where I've come from and what my story has been about, and maybe gives my audience a bit of an inkling as to what they can expect from future episodes too. So thank you so much. I so appreciate you. Oh my gosh, I'm just going to share something to keep this fucking real and raw. We recorded this. My gosh, we recorded this, like 3 weeks ago, the first time?
Yeah.
Oh gosh. I accidentally erased it and like double erased it, and then didn't remember for a few days at least. So then when I downloaded the software to try and retrieve it, it was just not there. And my gosh. So just so that you know, when things look shiny and perfect sometimes in the online world, these are the types of things that are going down behind the scenes. So thank you, but also thank you times a million for coming back to this space and having this conversation again. I so appreciate you. You're an incredible woman.
Just loved it. It's just beautiful to hear it all again and differently.
It has been cool to have it slightly differently. So my love, if you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to check back in, as there is plenty more to come. Thank you for being here for this conversation, my love. If you would like more free resources, if you'd like to learn about my programs or coaching opportunities, you can find all of that information at my website, gemmahanley.com. I'll link it below in the show notes. And if you would like to connect daily, head over and find me on Instagram. My handle there is Gemma E. Hanley, and I reply to all of my DMs there personally. If you enjoyed this episode and found it valuable, please share it with someone. You never know who needs to hear one little thing to take their day from feeling stuck and heavy to light and free. See you on the next one.